The rescue. The crimson dust of Kepler 442b swirled around Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez as he picked his way through the wreckage of what had been a fierce battle just hours before. The twin suns cast harsh shadows across the battlefield, illuminating twisted metal and scattered debris from both human and alien vessels. Marcus adjusted his medical pack and continued his sweep for survivors, though he knew the chances were slim. His squad had been wiped out in the ambush 3 days ago. He was the sole survivor of Charlie Company 3rd Marine Division and had been moving toward the extraction point when the sounds of the crash had drawn him off course. Military protocol said to maintain course to the rendezvous, but Marcus had never been good at leaving people behind. The alien ship was unlike anything he had seen before. Where human vessels were built for function over form, this craft showed elegant curves and flowing lines that seemed almost organic. The hull was a deep blue-black material that shifted colors in the light, and intricate symbols were carved along its sides. It had to be Veltar, he realized, the warrior race that had been humanity's most dangerous enemy for the past 5 years. Marcus approached carefully, his rifle ready but not raised. He could hear faint sounds from within the wreckage, something between a moan and a growl. Following the noise, he found a breach in the hull and squeezed through. The interior was a mess of sparking electronics and twisted metal. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie blue glow. Marcus followed the sounds deeper into the ship, until he found her trapped beneath a support beam that had crushed the lower half of her body. She was definitely Veltar, but unlike any he had encountered in combat. Her skin was a pale lavender color with darker purple markings along her arms and face. Her armor was ceremonial rather than practical, made of some kind of scaled material that gleamed even in the dim light. Most striking were her eyes, a brilliant silver that seemed to glow with their own light. When she saw him, those eyes blazed with fury, and something else he couldn't identify. She spoke in rapid Veltar, her voice sharp and commanding despite her obvious pain. Marcus didn't speak the language, but the tone was clear enough. "Easy there," he said, setting down his rifle and approaching with his hands visible. "I'm here to help." She hissed something that was definitely a curse and tried to reach for a weapon that wasn't there. The effort cost her, and she slumped. Back with a groan of pain that she quickly stifled, Marcus activated his medical scanner and ran it over her trapped lower body. The readings made him wince. Her spine was compressed at the second lumbar vertebra, and both legs showed signs of severe trauma. Without immediate surgery, she would never walk again. Even with surgery, the chances weren't good. He looked up to find her watching him with those intense silver eyes. There was intelligence there, and pride, and something that might have been shame. She spoke again, more quietly this time, and Marcus caught one word he recognized. "Leave." "Not happening," he said firmly. "I don't leave people behind." It took him 20 minutes to rig a lever system using debris from the ship to lift the beam enough to pull her free. She remained conscious throughout the process, biting back sounds of pain but never crying out. When he finally had her clear, he could see the full extent of her injuries. Her legs were completely unresponsive and she was bleeding internally. Marcus wrapped her in thermal blankets from his survival kit and administered painkillers from his medical supplies. She tried to refuse them at first, but he was insistent. "You're going into shock," he explained, though he doubted she understood his words. "These will help." As the medication took effect, some of the rigid tension left her body. She studied his face as he worked, and Marcus found himself uncomfortable under that silver gaze. Her features were sharp and angular, with high cheekbones and a narrow jaw. She would have been beautiful by human standards if not for the alien cast to her bone structure and the predatory quality of her expressions. When he finished his medical assessment, Marcus sat back on his heels and considered his options. The extraction point was 45 miles northeast, through territory controlled by hostile Veltar forces. He could make it alone in 2 days if he pushed hard. With her, it would take 4 days minimum, assuming they weren't discovered. The smart play was to leave her. She was an enemy combatant, probably an officer given her ceremonial armor. Intel would want to interrogate her, but that wasn't his job. His job was to get back to friendly lines alive. She seemed to understand his dilemma. She spoke again in Veltar, gesturing toward his rifle and then toward herself. The meaning was clear enough: put her out of her misery and go. Marcus stood up and checked his gear. He had enough supplies for the journey, barely. His water would run short, but there were known sources along the route. Food would be tight, but he had gone hungry before. "Can you understand me at all?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly, which he took as a maybe. "I'm Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, United Earth Marine Corps. I'm going to get you out of here." Her silver eyes widened in what might have been surprise or alarm. She spoke rapidly in Veltar, her tone urgent and almost pleading. "Sorry, I don't speak your language, but I heard no in there somewhere." Marcus began organizing his gear for the journey. "Tough luck, I don't leave people behind, even enemy people." The alien made a sound of pure frustration and tried to push herself upright. The effort was too much, and she collapsed back onto the blankets, breathing hard. Marcus finished his preparations and fashioned a travois from debris and his spare clothing. It wasn't pretty, but it would allow him to drag her across smoother terrain. For the rough spots, he would have to carry her. When he lifted her onto the makeshift stretcher, she was surprisingly light. The Veltar were built for agility rather than mass, and she probably weighed no more than 120 pounds. Still, 45 miles was a long way to carry someone. They made good time for the first few hours. The terrain was relatively flat, and Marcus was able to pull the travois across the rocky ground without too much difficulty. His passenger remained silent, but he could feel her watching him constantly. As the twin suns began to set, Marcus found shelter in a cave that offered concealment from aerial patrols. He set up their camp efficiently, rationing water and food carefully. When he offered her a ration bar, she looked at it suspiciously. "It's human food," he admitted. "Probably tastes terrible to you, but it's nutritious." She took a small bite and made a face that was almost comical. Then she surprised him by eating the rest of it methodically. "Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to her questioningly. She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke a single word that sounded like music. "Zarathiel." "Zarathiel," he repeated, probably butchering the pronunciation. She winced slightly but nodded. They traveled for 3 more days. Marcus had to carry her more often as the terrain became rougher, lifting her onto his back in a fireman's carry when the travois became impractical. She bore this with stoic silence, though he could tell it humiliated her. On the morning of the 4th day, they encountered a Veltar patrol. Marcus heard the whine of their engines before he saw them, and immediately sought cover behind a rocky outcrop. Zarathiel's eyes went wide when she saw the approaching vehicles, and she began speaking urgently in her native language. 3 hover bikes crested the ridge, each carrying a Veltar warrior in full combat armor. They were scanning the area methodically, searching for something or someone. One of them called out in accented English, "Human, we know you are here. Surrender and you will be killed quickly." Marcus checked his rifle. 12 rounds left and 3 enemy combatants with superior equipment and positioning. Not good odds. Zarathiel grabbed his arm and spoke in a fierce whisper. He couldn't understand the words, but her meaning was clear. She was telling him to use her as a shield or bargaining chip. "Not a chance," he whispered back. The patrol was getting closer. In minutes, they would discover the hiding spot. Marcus made his decision. He stood up slowly, his rifle lowered but ready, and called out, "I have one of yours. She's injured and needs medical attention." The patrol stopped and there were rapid exchanges in Veltar. Then the leader responded, "Show yourself, human." Marcus helped Zarathiel into a sitting position where she could be seen, then stepped partially into view with his hands visible. The reaction was immediate and electric. The 3 warriors dismounted and dropped to one knee, heads bowed. Whatever Zarathiel said to them next, it was in a tone of absolute command. They responded with what sounded like military acknowledgments. One of them activated a communication device and began speaking rapidly. Within an hour, a full Veltar medical team had arrived via dropship. They treated Zarathiel's injuries with equipment far more advanced than anything Marcus carried. stabilizing her condition and preparing her for transport to their command ship. As they loaded her onto a medical gurney, she looked back at him with those silver eyes. There was something unreadable in her expression, gratitude mixed with something darker. She spoke a few words to the medical team, then they were loading her into the dropship. The squad leader approached Marcus, weapon lowered but ready. "You will come with us, human," he said in stilted English. "The princess wishes to speak with you." Princess. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the implications hit him. He had just rescued Veltar royalty. That would explain the ceremonial armor and the patrol's reaction to seeing her. The dropship was alien technology beyond his understanding. The interior was spacious and comfortable, with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to respond to touch. Zarathiel was connected to various medical devices, but she was conscious and alert. During the flight to the command ship, she watched him constantly. Once, when the medical team was distracted, she spoke quietly in English, her accent thick but understandable. "You should have left me." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But I didn't." "Why?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Marcus thought about his squad, about the friends he had lost, about the war that seemed to have no end. "Because somebody has to stop the killing," he said finally. "Maybe it starts with not leaving people to die." She was quiet for the rest of the flight, but her silver eyes never left his face. The Veltar command ship was massive, a city-sized vessel that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. As they docked, Marcus could see hundreds of smaller ships arranged in precise formations around it. This was the heart of the Veltar war machine. They transferred Zarathiel to a medical bay that looked more like a garden than a hospital, with living walls and flowing water features. The technology was seamlessly integrated into what appeared to be a natural environment. A tall Veltar in ornate robes approached them. His skin was darker than Zarathiel's, a deep purple with silver markings that indicated high rank. When he saw her condition, his expression darkened with what Marcus recognized as rage. The conversation that followed was in rapid Veltar, with gestures toward Marcus that weren't friendly. Zarathiel's responses were sharp and commanding, clearly giving orders. The robed figure argued but eventually bowed his head in submission. "Marcus Rodriguez," Zarathiel said, switching to English. "You will be taken to quarters. Food and water will be provided. Tomorrow you will be brought before the War Council." "What happens then?" Her silver eyes were cold as space. "Tomorrow, you face the consequences of your actions." As guards escorted him from the medical bay, Marcus wondered if his moment of compassion had just signed his death warrant. But looking back at the proud alien princess he had carried 45 miles to safety, he found he didn't regret his choice. Some things were worth the risk, even if the price turned out to be his life. The betrayal and redemption. Marcus spent the night in what could only be described as a luxurious prison. The quarters were spacious and comfortable with the same organic design philosophy he had observed throughout the ship. The walls seemed to breathe, and bioluminescent panels provided soft lighting that adjusted to his presence. Despite the alien aesthetics, it was the nicest place he had slept in months. He didn't sleep much. Tomorrow would bring the War Council, and he doubted it would end well for him. Veltar military justice was notoriously swift and brutal. Still, he found himself thinking about Zarathiel's expression when the medical team had taken her away. There had been something there beyond the cold dismissal, something that might have been regret. The guards came for him at what he assumed was dawn, though it was impossible to tell time aboard the massive ship. They were professional, but not hostile, treating him more like a VIP than a prisoner. Marcus found that oddly unsettling. The War Council chamber was impressive, a vast circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed what appeared to be a real-time view of space around the ship. 12 high-ranking Veltar officers sat in elevated positions around the chamber's edge, their armor and ceremonial robes indicating their status. At the center of the circle, on a raised platform, sat Zarathiel. She was in a hover chair now, her legs covered by flowing robes that concealed her paralysis. The medical team had worked miracles in the few hours since their arrival. Her color was better, and she held herself with the same regal bearing he had seen even when she was trapped under debris. Only her eyes betrayed the pain she was still experiencing. Marcus was escorted to the center of the chamber where he stood alone before the assembled council. The acoustics were perfect. He could hear the soft whisper of their breathing and the gentle hum of Zarathiel's medical equipment. One of the council members, an elderly Veltar with elaborate scarification covering half his face, spoke first. His English was formal and precise. "Human Marcus Rodriguez, you stand before the War Council of the Veltar fleet. You are accused of violation of military protocol, interference with royal personage, and dishonor to the crown. How do you answer these charges?" Marcus looked around the chamber, then settled his gaze on Zarathiel. She was watching him with those silver eyes, her expression unreadable. "I don't understand the charges," he said honestly. "I found an injured person and provided medical assistance. In human society, that's not a crime." There was a murmur of conversation among the council members. The scarred officer leaned forward. "You touched royalty without permission. You saw the princess in a state of weakness and vulnerability. By Veltar law, this is punishable by death." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "She was dying. I saved her life." "You humiliated her," another council member interjected. "You forced her to accept help from an enemy. You made her appear weak before her own people." "I made her appear human," Marcus shot back, anger flaring. "Is that so terrible?" The chamber fell silent. Several council members reached for their weapons, and Marcus realized he had just committed another cultural violation. But Zarathiel raised her hand, and the tension eased slightly. "You do not understand our ways, human," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "In Veltar culture, to show weakness is to invite death. A leader who cannot protect themselves cannot protect their people. By helping me, you have made me appear unfit for command." Marcus stared at her. "So you want me executed because I saved your life?" "I want you executed because you witnessed my shame," she replied coldly. "Because you saw me broken and helpless, and now that knowledge exists in the universe. Every day you live is a reminder of my failure as a warrior and a leader." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Marcus said bluntly. The reaction was immediate. Half the council members were on their feet, weapons drawn. The other half were shouting in Veltar, their voices overlapping in what sounded like outrage. "Silence!" Zarathiel's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The council members settled back into their seats, but their anger was palpable. She turned her full attention to Marcus, and he saw something different in her silver eyes now. Not just anger, but something that might have been curiosity. "Explain," she said simply. Marcus took a deep breath. He was probably about to make things worse, but he had nothing left to lose. "You people have been fighting humans for 5 years?" he began. "In all that time, have you ever wondered why we keep winning battles we should lose? Why our technology keeps improving while yours stays the same?" "Human treachery and luck," one of the council members spat. "No," Marcus shook his head. "It's because we help each other. When a human falls, other humans pick them up. When someone is wounded, we carry them to safety. When someone fails, we help them try again. That's not weakness, that's strength." "Collaboration is a survival trait for weak species," the scarred officer said dismissively. "The strong stand alone." "Do they?" Marcus gestured around the chamber. "Then why are there 12 of you making decisions instead of one? Why do you have crews on your ships instead of single pilots? You cooperate when it serves you, but you call it weakness when someone needs help." Zarathiel was leaning forward now, studying him intently. "Continue." "Your princess didn't become weak when she got injured," Marcus said, meeting her gaze. "She became stronger when she accepted help. She trusted an enemy to save her life, and she was right to do it. That takes more courage than dying alone in a crashed ship." "You speak of things you do not understand," another council member interjected. Honor is keeping your word," Marcus interrupted. Honor is protecting those who can't protect themselves. Honor is doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. What you're describing isn't honor, it's pride. The chamber erupted again, but this time Zarathiel didn't call for silence. She let the argument rage around them while she continued to study Marcus with those penetrating silver eyes. Finally, she raised her hand again and quiet gradually returned to the chamber. "You would have me believe," she said slowly, "that accepting your help made me stronger rather than weaker. I would have you believe that being alive to lead your people is better than being dead with your pride intact," Marcus replied. Something shifted in her expression. "And what of the knowledge you now possess? The memory of my vulnerability?" Marcus considered this carefully. It was clearly the heart of the matter for her. "I remember pulling a brave warrior out of wreckage," he said finally. "I remember someone who stayed conscious and alert despite terrible injuries. I remember someone who never complained or begged or gave up, even when she thought she was going to die. If that's vulnerability, then vulnerability looks a lot like strength to me." For the first time since he had known her, Zarathiel smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible, but unmistakably genuine. "The human speaks truth," she announced to the council. "I was not weakened by accepting his aid, I was enlightened." The council members exchanged glances. This was clearly not going as they had expected. "Your Highness," the scarred officer said carefully, "if you do not wish the human executed, then what punishment do you propose?" Zarathiel was quiet for a long moment, her silver eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "No punishment," she said finally. "Release." "Your Highness?" The officer sounded confused. "Return him to human space unharmed." The chamber fell silent again. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in the stillness. "There is more," Zarathiel continued. "I propose a formal ceasefire between our forces, a temporary halt to hostilities, while we reassess our positions." Now the council members were on their feet again, but this time they weren't reaching for weapons. They were shocked, confused, and clearly divided. "Princess," one of them said carefully, "such a decision is beyond the authority of this council. It would require approval from the Imperial Senate." "Then we will contact the Imperial Senate," she replied calmly. "But first I wish to speak with the human privately." It took another hour of heated discussion, but eventually the council members filed out, leaving Marcus alone with Zarathiel in the vast chamber. She maneuvered her hover chair closer to where he stood, and for the first time since he had found her in the wreckage, they were having a conversation as equals rather than captive and captor. "You meant what you said," she said, "and it wasn't a question, every word. About weakness and strength, about helping others." Marcus nodded. "It's what makes us human, I think. Taking care of each other. It is not what makes us Veltar," she said quietly. "We are taught that individual strength is the highest virtue, that needing help is shameful. What do you think now?" She was quiet for a long time, looking out at the stars displayed on the dome above them. "I think," she said finally, "that a philosophy that would rather see its leaders die than accept help is a philosophy that will eventually destroy itself. Maybe that's why this war has gone on so long," Marcus suggested. "Neither side really understands the other." "Perhaps." She turned her attention back to him. "You could have left me to die. Your military protocols probably required it." "Probably. But you chose to help instead. Even knowing I was your enemy. Especially knowing that," Marcus said. "Enemies can become friends. Dead people can't become anything." She smiled again, more broadly this time. "You are a strange human, Marcus Rodriguez. You're a pretty strange alien yourself, Your Highness." "Zarathiel," she corrected. "If we are to be friends rather than enemies, you should use my name." "Are we going to be friends?" "I hope so," she said seriously. "I think our peoples have much to learn from each other." The next few hours passed in discussion. Zarathiel was curious about human culture, particularly their approach to leadership and cooperation. Marcus found himself explaining concepts that he had never really thought about before, things that seemed natural to humans but were foreign to Veltar thinking. In return, she told him about her people's history and culture. The Veltar had been warriors for thousands of years, shaped by a harsh homeworld where only the strongest survived. Their entire social structure was built around individual achievement and competition. But that's changing now, she admitted. Our technology has advanced to the point where physical strength matters less than intelligence and adaptability. Warriors like me are becoming obsolete, but we haven't figured out what to replace ourselves with. Maybe you don't need to replace yourselves, Marcus suggested. Maybe you just need to evolve. When the guards finally came to escort Marcus back to his quarters, Zarathiel had one final request. When you return to your people, she said, tell them that not all Veltar believe this war is necessary. Tell them that some of us are ready to find another way. I will, Marcus promised. And I'll tell them about a princess who was brave enough to admit she needed help. And I will tell my people about a human who was brave enough to help his enemy, she replied. The next morning, Marcus was transferred to a small shuttle and escorted to the edge of Veltar space, where he was released unharmed. The shuttle pilot, a young Veltar who spoke excellent English, handed him a sealed message before departure. This is from the princess, the pilot explained. She said you would know what to do with it. Marcus read the message during his flight back to human space. It was a formal proposal for peace negotiations, signed with Zarathiel's personal seal, and endorsed by 3 members of the War Council. 6 months later, representatives from both species met on a neutral station to begin the first formal peace talks in 5 years of war. The negotiations were difficult and sometimes heated, but they continued. Marcus was there as an observer, wearing his dress uniform and a new medal he had received for extraordinary service to the cause of interspecies understanding. Across the conference table, Zarathiel sat in her hover chair, no longer hiding her paralysis but wearing it as a badge of honor. She had become a powerful advocate for peace among her people, arguing that true strength came from wisdom rather than warfare. During a break in the negotiations, she approached him in the station's observation lounge. "Do you think it will work?" she asked, looking out at the stars through the massive viewport. "I think it's worth trying," Marcus replied. "After all, somebody has to stop the killing." She smiled, that same genuine expression he had seen in the War Council chamber. "Yes," she agreed, "and perhaps it starts with not leaving people to die. Even enemy people? Especially enemy people," she said, "because enemies can become friends." Looking out at the stars together, neither of them could predict whether the peace talks would succeed, but they had learned something valuable during their journey across Kepler 442b. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from admitting you need help, and sometimes the greatest courage comes from offering it to someone who should be your enemy. In the end, that might be enough to change the galaxy.